So this is recommended draft policy ARIN-2020-5, clarify and update requirements for allocations to downstream customers. Myself and Rob Seastrom are the shepherds for this policy. This is the history of this. This has been fairly fast. It's mostly editorial to align utilization requirements. So there weren't too many changes that were required. The text itself had a lot of changes, but the actual content inside of the policy didn't really change all that much. So next. Staff and legal review. The staff understanding is that this replaces RFC 2050, which references sections in section 4.2.3.4.1 and 4.2.3.6, with references to end user assignment utilization requirements in section 4.3.3. Staff comments were that this would align requirements for the downstream customers with existing ARIN end user policy and remove outdated RFC 2050 references, which has been a source of confusion in the past, and that this was clear and understandable and can be written or can be implemented as written. No material legal issues. Resource impact seems to be minimal, and the only thing that would be required would be the normal staff training, updated guidelines and internal procedures, and standard documentation updates. So the policy goal, this draft policy replaces outdated RFC 2050 references in sections 4.2.3.4.1 and 4.2.3.6 with references to the end user assignment utilization requirements in section 4.3.3. Next. So how did we get here? The AC working group, there are a few AC working groups right now working on various items, but this specific one is currently working on cleaning up some of the existing NRPM text. This was sent in as a policy update to correct the language. Given that RFC 7020, which supersedes 2050, no longer carries specific utilization requirements for downstream customers of ISP, the RFC reference may be removed from section 4.2.3.6 instead of referencing section 4.3.3. Currently 50% of the utilization within 24 months to harmonize the utilization requirements for both ISPs and to their downstream customers. Removing these references from section 4.2.3.6 will simplify the language of that section. Next. So I broke this up to try to understand the policy better. Normally I put all the current policy together and then put all of the proposed policy together. I broke this down into sections so you could actually see what's changing a little bit better. So the current policy, part 1, for this specific section for utilization, reassignment and reallocation information for prior allocations must show that each customer meets 80% utilization criteria and must be available via SWIP / a distributed service, which meets the standards set forth in section 3.2 prior to you're issuing them additional space. Next. So this is the rewritten policy just for this section. Downstream customer requesting address space from an upstream ISP must document a plan to the allocating ISP for their utilization to conform to section 4.3.3. Reassignment and reallocation information for prior allocation must show that each customer meets the 80% utilization criteria and must be available via SWIP / a distributed service, which meets the standards set forth in section 3.2 prior to your issuing them additional space. Next. So the current policy, this part 2 section, actually takes up 2 slides. Once cleaned up, it only takes up 1 slide. So it's much easier and a little bit cleaner to actually read through, although the The content, once the RFC references are cleaned up, is much easier to understand. Under the normal circumstances, an ISP is required to determine the prefix size of their reassignment to a downstream customer according to the guidelines set forth in RFC 2050. Specifically, a downstream customer justifies the reassignment by demonstrating they have an immediate requirement for 25% of the IP addresses being assigned, and that they have a plan to utilize 50% of their assignment within 1 year of its receipt. This policy allows a downstream customer's multi-homing requirement to serve as justification for /24 reassignment from their upstream ISP, regardless of host requirements. Next. And then there's more. Downstream customers must provide contact information for all of their upstream providers to the ISP from whom they are requesting a /24. The ISP will then verify the customer's multi-homing requirements and may assign the customer /24 based on this policy. Customers may receive a /24 from only one of their upstream providers under this policy without providing additional justification. ISPs may demonstrate that they have made an assignment to a downstream customer under this policy by supplying ARIN with the information they collected from the customer as described above, or by identifying the AS number of the customer. This information may be requested by ARIN staff when reviewing an ISP's utilization during their request for an additional ISP address space. Next. So that was all consolidated to this. If a downstream customer has a requirement to multi-home, that requirement alone will serve as justification for a /24 allocation. Downstream customers must provide contact information for all of their upstream providers to the ISP from whom they are requesting a /24 and utilize a border routing protocol between the customer and the ISP. Customers may receive a /24 from only one of their upstream providers under this policy without providing additional justification. ISPs may demonstrate they have made an assignment to a downstream customer under this policy by supplying ARIN with the information they collected from the customer as described above, or by identifying the AS number of the customer. Next. So the summary of all of that. So this was obviously the result of the NRPM working group. Initially, it was under discussion whether this would go in as just an editorial policy or whether this would go in as a full policy. We opted to do it as a full policy just because there was so much language that actually changed inside of all of the different sections. We wanted to make sure that we weren't actually functionally changing or breaking anybody's processes by changing the language and the references. So it simplifies the language, removes the reference to a deprecated RFC. We did check with multiple organizations, not just on PFML, which received positive reception, but also a few other organizations to see how this would functionally affect them and make sure that we weren't breaking anything. Everyone that we reached out to said that this wouldn't actually impact them in a negative way, or it wouldn't impact them at all. And if anything, it made it easier for them to discuss with their end users the language. There wasn't so much to actually explain to the edge customers that don't do this sort of thing on a daily basis. It clarified a lot of issues. And staff and legal, no inherent issues and fairly simple implementation. So after this meeting, we'd like to send this to last call if there aren't any issues with this, especially since this is editorial and this cleans up a lot of language. We'd like to get this through to make everything more clear. So I guess that's pretty much it for the policy. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions on this policy proposal 2020-5?
Or concerns?
Concerns, comments, policies.
Yes.
So we have, I think, three, which we
Basically
could do
one.
as one. So why don't we
Yes.
just do them as one, please? Staff.
Okay, I have Owen DeLong, Farsight Security, ARIN-AC suggests removing the term your in quote prior to your issuing them space in the proposed policy part 1, otherwise support as written.
Awesome.
Thank you. I think
I agree with that too. It seemed a little odd there, but again, I think there's a, yeah, we'll work on that.
thank you.
We have 2 hands.
I see we have 2 hands. Sorry, I'm just having a small problem. There we go. Okay, Zoom is being a bit weird today. Okay, let's go with Chris Whitfield, please.
Chris, you're all set?
Hello, Chris Woodfield, Twitter, ARIN-AC. Just a little bit of additional background on this. The working group that generated this policy, I am the chair of that working group. We are tasked with evaluating potential new policy as a result of ARIN's policy experience reports. So the impetus for examining this came directly from feedback from ARIN customers, filtered through the registration services group, and brought in. I believe this showed up in one of last year's policy experience reports, that this clause was a source of confusion. I obviously speak in support of the policy, and I'll note that ARIN does make Owen makes a good point. The use of the word "you're" there on in examination of it now seems odd and unnecessary. So I would fully support striking that word from the proposal.
Thank you, Chris. That's good. Next call. Did we lose our comment? Oh, sorry, there it is. Yes, Kevin Bloomberg, please.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Absolutely agree with Owen. Your isn't really needed and actually is syntactically incorrect. I have a question regarding 4.2.3.6. If you could bring up that slide about just for follow the bouncing ball on that one. So the part that I'm curious about is the /24 reassignment to multi-home. So the new text. Thank you. And it says, and utilize a border routing protocol between the customer and the ISP. One of the use cases for getting a 24 allocation and an AS number and BGP is not necessarily to have 2 upstream providers. It's to have a primary upstream provider and to have a unique routing scenario to a cloud provider, as an example, that dead ends at that cloud provider. It's for having a globally unique numbering scheme, but not actually being an ISP or an upstream. Is the language here too specific, or is it general enough to allow for a scenario where it is not going to 2 upstream providers, but is following more of the unique routing protocol scenario where multi-homing is allowed?
I'll just unmute. John, did you want to?
It's sufficiently general to handle the case. We have had parties apply for address space who have indicated that what they run may be different after they get the address space than what they get it originally at, because it's for standby or cloud, dedicated cloud connection or dedicated service provider. We don't police their subsequent use if it's more specialized.
So, John, it's only that as long as they are saying, I'm connecting to 2 ASs, whether they're upstream and propagating the route is not the relevant part to me. As long as that's allowed, then I fully support this. Otherwise, it seems like it's actually limiting down from the original sort of multi-homing concept of having a unique routing policy.
I don't think it would be restricted, but it's up to you. If you wish to make it clearer, you are the advisory council.
Well, not me, but
Not Kevin, but
so that like I said, I do support it, and I do ask that that be looked at just as a potential concern that we might have to get fixed after the fact again.
so thank you for that comment, Kevin. I'd like to just start to just time manage and close off. So if you're going to wish to speak, either raise your hand in the near future or type your question. If you have to type a long question, you can just give us a short typing comment so we could just keep you in the queue. But we will be closing the queues after these next two Q&A. So let's do both, please, staff.
Brian Jones, Virginia Tech, support as written and agree to remove your from Owen's comment.
Thank you. And the next one.
And Gus Reese, Cogent Communications, I support the policy as written. I have allocated many /24s to our end users using 4.3.2.6 to multi-home via BGP to us and to other ISPs.
Thank you, Gus, for the comment. Okay, we will now close the queues and we will go to our last speaker then, which is Owen DeLong.
Yeah. Owen, you should be all set.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, okay, good. In response to Kevin, I think he's conflating the traditional requirements for getting an ASN and the requirements here for getting a /24 from one of your upstream ISPs, which is what this policy is about. I don't see a useful case where you get a 24 from one ISP to use with multiple uplinks, either to that ISP or to another ISP, where you don't use a border gateway protocol or some form of exterior protocol at your border with that ISP in order to have the routing move to the active connection when the other connection fails. So I don't think that this requirement is overly restrictive.
Okay, thank you, Owen. That feedback obviously can be passed on to the AC. Okay, well, that closes off this topic, 2020-5, and right on time. So I'd ask everybody to take a second and contemplate as we bring up the poll. This will be our last policy and our last poll of the day. So on the issue of ARIN-2020-5, recommended draft policy, please let us know if you are in favor or against as written. A reminder, if you are having any problem voting, please put it in the Q&A and we will ensure it gets collected. So while this ends our policies for today while you're voting, a reminder that tomorrow we have day 2 and we have 3 policies. Our allowance for IPv4 allocation swap transactions by 8.3 and 8.4, GTLE micro allocation clarifications, and clarifying update 4.212 annual renewal fee. And of course, more presentations, which we'll be getting to in a second. Okay, we'll give another fair warning. And the poll is now closed. I ask staff to give us the results as they've tabulated them, please.
At the close of the poll, there were 119 attendees, 48 voted in favor and 3 against.
Thank you. That information will be passed on to the AC for their consideration. My thanks to Kat Hunter for a great presentation. My belated thanks also to Andrew Dull for his presentation last time. My apologies for that. So this ends our policy block.